Okay. Oh, here's another one. Okay, so before I call the case, anybody other than the lawyers and the defendant plan on making any kind of statements in this hearing? All right, if you would all go ahead and mute yourselves. I will ask again if somebody hears something they want to be heard before we finish. I'll go ahead and ask a second time. All right. Let's be on the record in case number 2020 ER16, captioned State of Kansas versus Christian Newton. Would the parties announce their appearances, please?
May it please the court, Candace Alcaraz appears on behalf of the state.
May it please the court, Your Honor, Klein Boone appears on behalf of the defendant, Christian Newton, who also appears in person and in custody by video conference as well.
All right, we are here set down for a sentencing today. Let me see, I downloaded this. I would note for the record that the parties appeared previously on March 6th of this year. At that time, the defendant changed his plea from one of not guilty to guilty. The court inquired and accepted. We set it for sentencing in April. However, the pandemic struck and we weren't able to get it going until today. As the parties noted, we are here by Zoom video conference today. And I would ask you, Mr. Newton, did you have, Ms. Newton, did you have an opportunity to talk to Mr. Boone about this? And are you okay in proceeding by way of Zoom today? Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
She said what?
So we're appearing by video conference today, all right? If you wanted to, we could all get together in a courtroom and do that. But due to the pandemic, trying to get this done as quickly as possible, my understanding from the lawyers are that you're okay proceeding for your sentencing today by this video conference. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. So when I accepted that plea, I ordered a pre-sentence investigation and set it over for sentencing. I've received a copy of that pre-sentence investigation, an amended copy of it. And the critical findings of it are as follows. The sole count of conviction is one of aggravated assault upon a law enforcement officer, which is a severity level 6 person felony. The defendant's criminal history score was found to be that of D. That would leave him with a presumptive prison sentence with a presumed range of 32, 34, and 37 months. If he has to do that time, he would be eligible for 15% good time credit and subject to post-release supervision of 24 months. If he's granted probation today, it would be for a period of 24 months to community corrections. Mr. Boone, I'm sorry, Ms. Alcaraz, I'll ask you first. Did you have a chance to review the amended PSI? Do you have any additions, corrections, or challenges to those findings?
Judge, I have reviewed it and I don't have any corrections or additions.
Mr. Boone, same question.
Judge, I've reviewed the amended PSI and I find that it's accurate, and in particular, the criminal history D. I went over with my client and I'm familiar with him. I've known Christian since 2014 and that is an accurate criminal history.
All right. Mr. Newton, I'm going to show you this document here on the screen. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is that pre-sentence investigation that I'm talking about. Mr. Boone tells me that he went over the findings of that. Particular, I'm going to scroll down here to the criminal history worksheet. starts right there on that page and goes over to this page. He says he reviewed all of that with you and you don't have any objections to those findings. Is that correct?
Yes, it's because, I had a bad reputation at a one point, but, I got a good heart. I try to do the best I can, but sometimes it elevates to that situation.
I understand that, Mr. Newton, and I'm going to give you a chance to tell me about your history and what you would like me to do today. But for purposes of this hearing, I just want to make sure that Mr. Boone went over all of that with you and that you're okay with it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I will adopt the findings of the amended PSI for today's hearing. Mr. Boone, you filed a motion for a departure. Would you like to be heard on that this morning?
Judge, I would, and I'm ready to proceed if you'd like me to.
Please do.
Judge, and that's why we have a lot of people that have logged in today for Christian. There's people from Wyandotte Center and relatives, and if they'd like to speak when I'm done towards my motion, that may be helpful. But as I stated in my motion, I think that it's always important that you can accept responsibility for a crime. And Christian, the minute I saw him in this case, he told me that he understood what he did was wrong and that he was accepting whatever consequence or punishment that would occur. And so we expeditiously, as soon as the competency evaluation was done, and that was only done out of an abundance of caution, Judge, he was on his medications while in the jail. He pled guilty as charged, and here we are at sentencing with everybody open to argue. And I think that's important that Christian accepted responsibility quickly and didn't waste any resources. And so I think the court can consider that alone as substantial and compelling. But also there's more compelling history for Christian just based on his criminal history and also his background. Christian has struggled for quite a long time with a mental illness of being schizophrenic. And that plays into, sometimes he has confrontations with the police officers as he did prior in 2014. And I would say this, Judge, in this particular incident, there was an active care and treatment case going on. And I know KCKPD has officers that are trained, CIT officers that are specially trained to deal with people that have these illnesses and challenges. And Christian did tell me that there were some issues about taking his medication or not taking his medication, and that he may have used marijuana at the same time as medication, and that can make him, act differently than he should. And I think that's what happened in this case. I don't believe he intentionally meant to hurt anybody, but here we are, and here we are accepting responsibility again for this crime. And I think that it's substantially compelling that he didn't try to raise the defense of mental illness. I think that the court can consider that in determining whether a departure should be granted. He didn't raise that defense, but I think it plays overall into what happened to Christian. Additionally, he had a care and treatment case active at the time. That case is still active. I know the people from Wyandotte Center have always tried to help out Christian. I know that when I contacted them, that they said they were willing to, take him back if the court would consider releasing him or granting him probation. And then they were not opposed of some type of probation being imposed. Additionally, I think his grandmother could speak also about his mental health history. I know that his mother struggled with that. Most importantly, Christian will tell you, and he's told me multiple times, Judge, when he's on his medication, it doesn't necessarily take all the issues he has. Christian still tells me he hears voices, but it kind of puts it away or makes it less significant. He tells me that he still can have visions of all sorts of things, but the medication does help. He's always understood me when he's on his medication, and competency has never been an issue, but that just plays into his life overall. And I think this court could consider a departure based on his circumstances, which are unique, and also his, mental health history. Also the fact that he held himself accountable in this case. Christian has told me that he would be willing to do probation if the court would consider that. And so my motion is, dual in nature, Judge. There's a dispositional departure request. And obviously if the court's going to consider a dispositional departure, Christian tells me he's not asking for any reduction in time. However, if the court's saying that he's going to have to go do some time, he has requested that I request a departure down to 18 months, What I can tell you is, Judge, he is still on parole, as the PSI says. That parole was for 3 years. I believe we were in year one. We had just started the second year's parole when this occurrence occurred. So any sentence is consecutive to his parole case, and so I don't know how his jail time credit's going to play out if the court's considering him to be going off to prison. But I think an 18-month sentence is appropriate based on him holding himself accountable and based on his mental health history here, Judge. And as it relates to anything in my motion, Judge, prior to sentencing, I'd ask you give the people from Wyandotte Center or any mental and any relatives an opportunity to speak, should they choose. I don't know if they want to.
Right. I will ask that after I ask Ms. Alcaraz, do you have a position on Mr. Boone's motion today?
Yes, Judge. Kind of going along with what counsel has said, the state does recognize that this particular defendant does have some mental health issues, but at the same time, the state has to consider our officers and their safety. This wasn't the first time something's happened with him. His previous case was also an aggravated battery on a Leo, and kind of had the same starting with him threatening to kill everybody and then getting into these altercations with officers. Fortunately, in this instance, the officer was able to move her head out of the way in time not to be hit by an 18-inch piece of steel rebar. And so the state does understand he has some issues and things he needs to get addressed for himself, but at the same time, we have to recognize the safety of our officers when they're out here trying to do their job. I wish that this didn't happen, and especially with him having that previous case and being on parole for it, but this is the situation that we're in. And so the state would ask for the mitigated number in this case, and leave all the other fines and costs and things of that nature up to the discretion of the court.
All right. Would anybody else like to be heard today before I hear from Mr. Newton himself on Mr. Newton's behalf?
Can you hear me?
Yes, would you please tell us your name and how you are related to this case?
My name's Jeanette Newton. I'm Christian Newton's grandmother.
Okay, ma'am, I would be happy to hear from you today.
Well, I love my grandson greatly. He was a wonderful child growing up. I really enjoyed him being at my house. I raised him from 12 years old on because my daughter passed away, and that was her only child. And Christian started acting differently at the age of right around 19 or so. He started being different, and I could tell there was something wrong. So we went to Wyandotte Mental Health, and he needs, instead of being in prison, he needs to be in a mental place to help him with his mental illness, because I don't think prison helps at all. And he does have a problem. I know he doesn't want to be the way he is. He wants to be normal, just like everybody else. But then he has this rage that comes over him at times that he can't seem to control. And I would love for him to get help instead of being punished over and over again.
Alrighty, thank you, Miss Newton. Would anybody else like to be heard on Mr. Newton's behalf? I'm sorry, is that you, Miss LaWanda Newton?
I don't think LaWanda's here.
I'm
Oh,
sorry, I'm Andrea Kessler. I was Christian's case manager at the Wyandotte Center.
okay, please go forward, Miss Kessler.
So I've been working with Christian for 2 years now, and I completely agree with his grandmother that he struggles with mental illness. Even when he's on his medications and doing well, he still every single day hears and sees things that other people do not hear and see. Christian was actually doing really well. He had his own apartment. He was attending his appointments. Unfortunately, he was having a bad day. I was with him the day that this incident happened, and I'm actually the one that called the police officers out there to check on him. And we've actually already done assessments to see if he qualifies for behavioral health court, depending on what happens with this case. So we have other programs set up for him already to help him when he is released from custody.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kessler. Anybody else?
My name is LaWanda.
Hi,
1 second, Miss LaWanda Newton, please go forward.
Yes, my name is LaWanda Newton. I'm Christian's aunt, and I don't have anything to add. My mother and his social worker covered it already. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe it was Miss Wright that was also trying to speak. Is that correct?
yes, sir. I was actually part of, Christian was all that time, and I just wanted to clarify that I do believe that his mental health played a significant role in the day's events. I was there on site, and it was very clear that he was not able to kind of manage his symptoms at that time. I would also say that working with it's a high intensity support team, which is really set up for folks like Christian that do have, pretty significant mental illness and, need that extra support. So more often they're able to get seen more regularly, sometimes 3 to 5 times a week. We can definitely step in and do things on a more intensive level. And so I definitely think that this would be a good fit for him. And I think, given the opportunity, we would be happy to work with him. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Wright. And everybody, if you're not currently speaking, please mute yourself. I'm having a little bit of interference. All right, Mr. Newton, now is your opportunity to tell me anything you want me to know today about yourself in regards to this sentence.
Sir, please, could you excuse me? Sometimes I go kind of deaf and I can only hear out my mind. And when I'm on certain medication, it blocks me out, so I trip, but I couldn't hear you. Can you say that again?
Okay, yes. This is your time to tell me what you want me to know, anything you want me to know in regards to this sentence today.
I want to let you know that I didn't mean to do what I do, and I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody on my behalf, and I'll try to do better even with time, but I was going to ask for probation or parole or any longer consent, because I want to see my children and I want to be out there with my grandparents and my family. I miss them, and we had a hard time, and a lot of times I get schizophrenic. I'm schizophrenic, so I'll probably be on Jupiter or something, or somewhere out in the jungle, and when I come back, people just look at me like, oh, it's just schizophrenia, and I'm on medication that makes me feel worse, and I'm under pressure all the time. So I just felt like everybody was bullshitting me, and I'm sorry, and I apologize.
Alrighty, thank you, Mr. Newton.
Mhm.
Mr. Boone, do you know any legal reason why I should not now proceed to sentencing?
No, Judge.
All right. Well, look, I'm more than convinced of the defendant's motion and the substantial and compelling reasons that exist to depart from his presumption of prison and grant him probation today. I do think that while his mental state is not a complete defense to the charges, it certainly mitigates his culpability in his action in this. I think that granting him probation today will serve defendant reformation much better than any prison sanction would, particularly with the support of family and professionals that have presented today for Mr. Newton. So therefore, I am going to give him the mitigated sentence of 32 months in the Department of Corrections. If he ever has to do that time, he'll be eligible to 15% good time credit and subject to 24 months of post-release supervision. His application for probation today is considered and it is granted to community corrections for a period of 24 months. A specific term of his probation will be that he continue to cooperate and participate in his mental health services. I'm of a mind, Mr. Boone, without inquiring too deeply of your client, I assume that he's on a very fixed income and that payments to costs and fees would be a particular hardship to him. Is that correct?
Judge, that is correct.
All right. I'm going to waive court cost, supervision fee, attorney's fees. He's already in the DNA database. So he doesn't need to pay that fee. There's no fine for today's hearing. So I think that should take care of everything as far as those go. Mr. Newton, as a convicted felon, it's prohibited for you to own or possess a firearm, certain kind of deadly cutting instruments like dirks, daggers, switchblades, things like that that are in the statute and basically that can be considered deadly weapons. If you have questions about that, Mr. Boone can answer those for you. Okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. You have 14 days from today to appeal anything you don't like about your sentence. And this sentence does carry a requirement that you register as an offender for the rest of your life. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Ms. Alcaraz, anything that I failed to cover today?
Judge, I guess in the amended, the registration said the 15 years, but you just said it's supposed to be lifetime.
I believe that's correct, that as his second registerable offense.
Okay.
Mr. Boone, any objection to that?
No, Judge, I think I said that. I thought she changed it when I noted that prior, but yeah, that is correct. And obviously we're consecutive to his parole case. And so I don't know when he'll get released. He may still have a parole hold.
Right. That is ordered by operation of law. This sentence is to run consecutive to his previous case. And I don't know that either. He'll be granted all the jail time credit he deserves on this. Ms. Alcaraz, if you and Mr. Boone can figure that out. And I'm going to sign a release in this case. That doesn't necessarily mean, Mr. Newton, you get right out today. I don't know if you have a hold on your parole case or not, but you're going to be released on this case, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So now that we've covered that, Ms. Alcaraz or Mr. Boone, anything else you need on the record?
No, Judge.
No, Judge.
All right, Christian, you keep working with these ladies, okay? And they're here to help you out. And look, I understand that there are good days and bad days, okay? And that you're trying really hard.
Yes, sir.
And I want you to keep doing that. I'm going to tell you that while you're on probation with me, as long as you're trying hard, then you're going to be all right with me, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, good luck to you, Christian.
Good luck to you too.
Thank you, sir. We are adjourned.
Thank you, brothers.
All right. I don't know
right.
really. Are
The lawyers jumped out of here fast. Michelle also did. So, all right, I'm just going to end it. Thank you all.